Hello everybody, welcome to my weekly live Q&A episode number 28. My name is Danny Segura. Thank you for joining me on this Tuesday morning. A little bit of a switch in times. Usually I'm doing these at 7 p.m. but trying out the 7:30 a.m. slot. 10:37 a.m. slot here. Obviously I'm a little bit late, so I apologize about that. Um, I was kind of, to be honest, this is the most number of questions I've ever had for a live Q&A. So kind of overwhelmed and underestimated the time that it would take me to upload these to the system as far as the Twitter questions go. So anyways, you know me, Danny Segura. I'm a mixed martial arts reporter for MMAJunkie.com. And this is my weekly live Q&A where I talk all things combat sports and everything beyond. So the way this works is you submit questions via Twitter. I answer them. And then at some point when those run out, I take things over to the YouTube live chat where I know you guys have been already asking a few things there, and then I answer those questions there. Now, this is, to be honest, this is the most number of questions I've ever gotten on Twitter by far. So I don't know, to be honest, if I'm gonna be able to get to the YouTube stuff, but I'll do my best. Either way, I do think that the stuff asked on Twitter was really great and kind of really, I think it's going to do a good job at recapping everything that happened over the weekend and just over the week, just news in general. Sometimes I know there's some live Q&As that come to an end and I'm like, oh man, I want to talk about this and I forgot about that, because usually it either doesn't get brought up in a question and then I just forget and then I don't bring it up myself. But thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. Joining me in this live Q&A here. I am sporting my Colombian jersey. Not the 90s one that I usually rock. This is the Brazil World Cup 2014, as you can see here. Yesterday was July 20th, which was Colombian Independence Day. And I've been so busy with trying to, get everything ready for the launch of Hablemos MMA, my Spanish language podcast under USA Today Sports and MMA Junkie that comes out next Monday. Pretty excited. And that and work and a bunch of other stuff and the world's falling apart that I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. And yeah, and then some way, so at some point throughout the day, I'm in several group chats, with multiple friends, different friends groups and whatnot, and I have one with all my Hispanic friends. And they threw out there, a few videos, and then, they were kind of talking about it, and I saw it, and I'm like, oh shit, of course. And I felt so bad. I felt so bad that I actually just started playing the national anthem on my computer here, and I'm like, dude, I felt really bad. So today I'm sporting the jersey. I think one of the best World Cups that we've had, at least in recent memory. That's where really James made his name. Unfortunately, Falcao wasn't able to compete in that World Cup due to injury, but that's when James really took the torch and kind of proceeded. I'm also drinking out of a authentic and also original mug from Russia 2018 World Cup. My former roommate and one of my best friends, he went to Russia 2018 to watch Colombia play, which also was a very good World Cup for us. And then he brought me back this little souvenir. So I'm making it up. Also, Colombian coffee, Sello Rojo. So, believe me, I felt bad. But anyways, here we are, right? So let's get right into it without any more wait. Like I said, all these questions were fire. They were pretty good. And, all kinds of questions, too. So I think you guys did a fantastic job on Twitter. And kind of taken away by the number and the quality as well. Not that it's usually bad, but like I said, this time it was just out of this world. So anyways, let's get right into it. The Seaside. Love me some Seaside. Seaside asks, what is the flyweight division future if the champion keeps calling out fighters who are either retired or not in the UFC? So, for those that don't know, UFC on ESPN Plus 30, aka UFC Fight Island 2, wrapped up this weekend with basically Deiveson Figueiredo becoming the new UFC Flyweight champion, defeating a longtime contender Joseph Benavidez in a very, very dominant first round performance. It was a first round submission win via rear naked choke, and it was somewhat of a to be honest. Usually, when a champion is crowned, there's something to be celebrated. There's something that people are excited for. But in this one, it very much felt the opposite. It felt like everyone was sad and felt bad for Joseph Benavidez. Now 0-4 in title fights, UFC title fights. Also 0-2 against another champion. So the path back to the title is kind of hard for him at this point. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I know he says that was his last, but never say never, right? But it really did feel like that. It felt like this was it for Joseph Benavidez. It was do or die in that cage in this circumstance. Obviously, fourth title shot, 35 years old, and he fought like it was do or die. I tweeted that. I'm like, as soon as the fight started, I'm like, Deiveson Figueiredo is going to have to, after a few back takes that Joe was able to escape and a few chokes, I'm like, dude, Deiveson Figueiredo is going to have to put to sleep this guy because there's no quitting this guy. This guy's going to have to be unconscious for you to beat him. That's it. As long as there's breath in him, as long as there's consciousness in him, he's going to be finding or at least trying to find a way to win at all times. So even in defeat, admirable performance by Joseph Benavidez, and I think obviously trolls are trolls, and I think some people were kind of hating on it, but for the most part, I feel like everyone paid their respects to a veteran of the sport, a pioneer of the flyweight division, and yeah. But anyways. So yeah, then after the fight, you get Deiveson Figueiredo going to the post-fight press conference, basically just calling out Henry Cejudo, who's retired, former flyweight champion, former bantamweight champion, and also basically saying that he would welcome back or welcome Demetrius Johnson back to the UFC, that he would take him on, and this and that. Obviously, Demetrius Johnson, the greatest flyweight of all time, one of the greatest fighters of all time. And certainly, one of the greatest champions of all time as well, UFC champion. So he's out here calling out for the big fights, and I get it. I'm not gonna bash him for it. Those are obviously the bigger money fights in the division, at least the bigger money fights in his reach, right? He's not gonna call out Conor McGregor or any of that. These are actual, I guess, plausible fights, right? And I'm throwing the quotes up there because I actually don't think they're all that plausible. Maybe the Cejudo one at some point, but not right now. Right now, he's got his eyes on 45 plus 125. Like, I really don't think Cejudo will ever fight back down at 125. And then also Deiveson Figueiredo pretty much mentioned he wanted to compete at 135 and challenge the champion there and have a champ sort of super fight. So to be honest, it was a little bit not upsetting, but like it was a little bit. It just kind of, you would think that like with everything that's happened to the UFC flyweight division, that at some point, not that long ago, it was in jeopardy, and it kind of still feels like, although it's still here, it kind of feels like it's still in limbo, like one bad turn and things could go south for the division, right? It doesn't really feel like it's fully established and fully, in a good position, in a solid position. It doesn't feel like that. So you would think the champion would want to sort of establish that by doing what? Establishing some order and calling out, the contenders or saying something like that. Instead, he's looking for other options, basically like in some sort of way devaluing the division, right? Because you don't want to fight in your division. You want to go up to 135 and challenge the champ. You want to fight Henry Cejudo, who's retired. You want to fight someone, Demetrius Johnson, who's in another organization. Well, what about the guys in your division? What about the guys that are currently fighting at 125 pounds, right? So you would think he would try to develop some interest, but again, I'm not trying to bash him. I get it. This is prize fighting, and at the end of the day, he's trying to go for the biggest prize. So with some of the comments that Dana White has made, I don't think the future of the flyweight division, as of now, at least the near future, is in jeopardy. I think the division will remain established, especially right now when you get guys like John Jones, right? Khabib, these guys seem to be out of commission, obviously for very much different reasons, but it seems like they won't be fighting for a bit. So you need belts in circulation. Also, Amanda Nunes, she wants to take a break. We know that Nina Ansaroff is pregnant, so she's expecting their baby. And so we know that there's some belts that are on the ice right now. So the UFC needs as many belts as possible to be circulating, so they can either make pay-per-views or prop up or beef up these fight nights. They need the belts right now. So I don't think the flyweight division is going anywhere at this point in time. And I don't think the UFC is interested in having Deiveson Figueiredo go up to 135. Or, I don't think they're picking up the phone and being like, yo, Segura, what's good? Deiveson Figueiredo just became champ. You want to come back? That ain't happening either. I don't think the UFC is also hitting up one championship and be like, hey, Deiveson Figueiredo is champion now. Can you guys bring back Demetrius? I don't think none of that has happened. I think what they're going to do is just give Deiveson Figueiredo the next contender and have the belt do what the belt is supposed to do, which is get defended against contenders of the division. So I don't think in any way the division is in some sort of danger. I do think the UFC is still kind of keeping a close eye to see what the interest is and sort of what they're able to get out of that division. But certainly as of now, I don't think I'm as worried as I was maybe a few months ago when division was up in the air. We have a champion. Seems they're committing to the champion. It's an exciting champion. It's a champion that's a Brazilian champion who obviously Brazil's a big market for MMA and the UFC. So there's a lot of plus here. So I think there's a lot to gain, and I think the future of the UFC flyweight division is going to be just fine. To answer your question, the seaside. Alrighty. Question número dos. This one is actually in Spanish. I'll do a little bit of translating. Dustin Love asks, Hola Dani, ¿estás de acuerdo que The Assassin Baby es el siguiente en fila para una oportunidad por el título de 125 libras? Con sus comentarios recientes, ha ganado terreno y ya son Brandon como el contendiente legítimo. ¿Crees que el UFC hace esta pelea? So Dustin Love basically asking if Brandon Moreno is up next and if the UFC is going to make that fight. Let's pull up the rankings here because I know, obviously, as you guys know, I have interviewed Brandon Moreno many times in the past, and we have, we've built that relationship, and also, I recently I actually got his thoughts on Joseph Benavidez' defeat to Deiveson Figueiredo, as well as what he thinks should happen next at flyweight. That's all up on MMA Junkie. You can check that out. It's written an article in English, 2 different articles. So you can check that out. Great stuff from Brandon Moreno. So I'm not being biased here. Let's just pull up the UFC rankings. So, I have some facts here to back up what I'm about to say. So the UFC rankings, as of now, and again, they haven't been updated. So there is no champion right now. Obviously there is, but in the rankings, they haven't been updated. There's no champion. So Deiveson Figueiredo is still the #1 contender. So all you got to do is bump everyone up a slot, right? So you got Deiveson Figueiredo as champion. The #1 contender is Joseph Benavidez, but I suspect that's going to go down. 2 defeats in a row to Deiveson Figueiredo. So I suspect that's going to go away. And then after that, who's the next in line? Brandon Moreno. Right now, he's currently #3, and that's keeping in mind, again, Davidson's #1. So technically, Moreno's #2, and the guy that's #1, Joseph Benavidez, as of now, the not updated rankings, is 0-2 against the champion. And then below Brandon Moreno is Alexander Pantoja, who lost also on that same card against Askar Askarov. So I think it's pretty clear. It's Brandon Moreno is up next. I don't think that I'm being biased here. I think I call things how they are. I'm more than comfortable in saying, especially with Brandon. Brandon is a very some fighters get not offended, but they can take it personally if you say maybe they're at a certain spot, or maybe if your analysis is not in favor of their interest, I guess. But that's not Moreno. Moreno is super down to earth, and he calls things how they are. And I would feel extremely comfortable saying no, Brandon Moreno shouldn't get the next title shot. He doesn't deserve it. But as of now, he's the next contender. He's the highest ranked. I think there is a little bit. I think if Pantoja would have beaten Askarov, there would have been a a good claim for maybe Pantoja to slide in there. Yes, Pantoja lost to Deiveson Figueiredo, so he has that defeat. So it wouldn't be a fresh face, and Brandon Moreno would. But you can also make the argument that Pantoja has a win over Brandon Moreno, and although it's some time ago, but it's still a win. And then he's coming off the Askarov win as well. Plus, he was also pitched as sort of the replacement opponent in case Figueiredo didn't make weight. It was going to be Pantoja versus Benavidez because Figueiredo has had issues making 125 pounds. So that would have been a different story, but the truth is that he lost. So maybe you can pitch Askarov. Okay. But Askarov doesn't have a win over Moreno. They fought to a draw, and I was there at that fight. It was in Mexico City, and most people thought that Brandon Moreno won, including myself. It was a good fight. Don't get me wrong. It was a competitive fight. It was a fight that impressed me watching Askarov, but it was a fight that I scored for Moreno, and it felt like a victory, for Moreno. Also, I'm pulling up here a couple stats. For Askarov, let me pull up his record here. Okay, so Askarov also, he's a fairly new face to the UFC, right? He does have a win over Tim Elliott, which is nice. Alexander Pantoja, that's nice. But he's 2-0-1 in the UFC, whereas Brandon Moreno, he's even headlined UFC events, right? He headlined one with Pettis, with Sergio Pettis in Mexico City, and he's been in some big fights. So he's got a little bit of a better resume as well. So look, I think Askarov is a great fighter, but certainly he's on his way up, while Brandon Moreno is already there. Like, he's fought for that position. Also, he beat Joseph Formiga in March. That's before the whole pandemic hit. That was UFC Brasilia, and Joseph Formiga is a great fighter. So it just, all things point to Brandon Moreno. And again, this is me not being biased. I just explained to you why he deserves a title shot, and those are all facts. And I think for some situations there's a lot of debate for this one, unless you're going to do a super fight with Deiveson Figueiredo, which I don't think the UFC has any interest in doing that. Even Dana White said it at the post-fight presser. If you just look at the division, that's what makes sense. Also, Askarov is coming off a fight. I'm assuming he would want a break and all that. Brandon Moreno's literally telling me, I want the fight right now. I'm ready to fight right now. In fact, when I texted him after the fight, around like 10:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, I was like, did you watch the fight? Super casual, right? The first thing he replied, he didn't reply, hey Danny, how's it going? This and that. He just wrote, lo voy a matar. I'm going to kill him. That was their conversation. I'm like, all right, you want to talk? And he's like, all right, yeah. Let's do an interview. So yeah, Moreno is definitely next. I think it's a pretty obvious one. All right, question número 3 by fan of Mr. Station. Best fighter who never won a title. So I feel like that's a question that's obviously been brought up a lot, given that that Joseph Benavidez came up short once again. He's now 0-4 in UFC title fights. And I believe he might be 0-2 in WEC fights, or no, or he might be 0-1. Let me pull up his record to double check here. I don't know. I'm forgetting how many times he challenged for the belt in WEC. Only once. Yeah, against Dominic Cruz, that was a close fight. I remember watching it. It was a split decision defeat. So yeah. So with that defeat, and obviously the odds looking very, very slim for Joby to get back to. I don't think the odds are slim for him to get back into title contention because he's that good. I feel like Joseph Benavidez could easily, at this point in time, even at 35 years of age, and I think he's a little bit past his prime, if I'm being quite frank. I think if it was a few years ago and he would have fought Deiveson, I'm not saying the fight would have been differently, but I can bet my life on it. It would have been a lot more competitive. Certainly whatever Joseph Benavidez displayed that night, he's been capable of doing a lot more in the past. And bro, like Figueiredo's a great fighter. Don't get me wrong. I'm not underestimating him at all. I think I think very highly of him. But keep in mind who Joseph Benavidez has fought. Right? He's fought Henry Cejudo. He's fought Demetrius Johnson twice. He fought Dominic Cruz in his prime twice. That's why I'm thinking he challenged for the belt twice, but one of those fights was non-title fight. I mean, he's really been fighting guys who are considered some of the greatest of all times, at least in their respective weight classes. In the case of Demetrius Johnson and maybe Cejudo now, I think you can kind of make an argument. These are pound for pound greatest of all time, right? Again, I think very highly of Deiveson Figueiredo, but I wouldn't necessarily put him in that conversation, at least not yet. So certainly I think Joseph Benavidez is up there when we talk about the best fighter who never won a title. I mean, and not only because anyone can lose to a great fighter, right? I mean, most fighters lose to the greatest fighters, right? It's obviously if the other fighter is great and considered one of the greatest of all time, you expect a defeat from whoever fights them. So I don't really think that's like a thing you can put into play here, but certainly I think is the nature of the fights, because the fights were close. Like that first Demetrius fight, he took him to a split decision. That was a very close fight. I remember watching that back in 2012. Those two Dominic Cruz fights were both close, man. And yeah, I mean, he took some of the greatest of all time to he pushed them to their limits. And, depending on who you ask, some may think that he won those fights. I don't think the decisions were super controversial for the most part. Like, I think that the guys who won were probably the rightful winners, but just the fact that he took them to a decision and it was competitive enough to be split and to have some people be split as well. Because you can have a split decision and still have most people have it, feel like it was unanimous, right? So I think he's definitely up there. I'm trying to think of other fighters that are really good that have never won a title. I think maybe you can put Joel Romero up there. I mean, he's certainly up there, but Joel Romero's sort of window of sort of this time that we're analyzing is much shorter than Joe B. I mean, when I'm talking about Joe B, I mean, he challenged for a world title in 2010. That was a decade ago. That was literally August 18th. That was a decade ago. And if you're able to stay, ever since I can remember, Joseph Benavidez has been at the top of his division. Like, he's always been 2 or 3, always. Like, to be honest, I don't have like all that much memory of like a Joseph Benavidez that like was a prospect for a while and was coming up and was in the lower, outside of the rankings and starting to, like he didn't really, at least from what I remember, he didn't really have that big of a, like he didn't linger that much in sort of, I'm sure obviously he had to come up somewhere, right? But he didn't really linger too much in that space. Like right from the get-go, it seemed like he was a top 3. I mean, again, he challenged for a world title in 2010. That was a decade ago. So the man has been at the very top of 2 different divisions for over a decade and for 11 years. And that's super, super impressive. So I might say it's him. And I think a lot of that was a little bit of bad luck on his part. The fact that like just bad timing, if you think about it, like he really just came across some of the greatest of all time. And that's just, it's very much like the Alexander Gustafsson situation where, just John Jones was in his weight class with Daniel Cormier. Like, dude, you're a fantastic fighter, but trying to beat those 2 guys it's rough, and he came really close to it. So yeah, I might say that's the best fighter to never win a title, Joseph Benavidez. And then with Deiveson Figueiredo, I think timing is very much the case as well, in a different sense, because he's not fighting an all-time great then, but at the time he got back and he was able to fight for the title again after so many years of not fighting the title. Because remember, the last time he fought for a belt prior to meeting Deiveson Figueiredo was 2013. It's a long time ago. I was still in college. I was like kind of just starting out in college too. Um, so yeah, that was a while ago. So I think if the title shot again with Deiveson Figueiredo would have came much sooner, I don't know. I think his chances of becoming champion would have been much higher. So again, just a little bit of bad luck and bad timing from his part, but certainly an all-time great for the lower weight classes. I don't give a fuck that he didn't win a belt. Like Joseph Benavidez is an all-time great in the lower weight classes for sure. One of the greatest flyweights to ever do. Period. Not the greatest, but one of the greatest for sure. Certainly. So I think Joe B. Could be some recency bias. I don't know. All right. Let's see. Terrence Leverett. Shouts out to Terrence. Consistency, always. Like Colombian coffee, like always consistent. Top quality questions here. All right, so Terrence asks, the fight to make is Kelvin versus Tyron at 185 or 170. Both are coming off a few losses and they have fought before. Could be redemption for Kevin or Tyron, showing it wasn't a fluke. What are some other matchups you would like to see that are not being talked about as possible? So yeah, another storyline that developed from that card was Kelvin Gastelum suffering a defeat. Now he's suffered a few defeats throughout his career, so it's not like we haven't seen him, be at the sort of get the short end of the stick here in a fight. But certainly, I feel like this one felt a little bit different. So let's analyze and recall some of his previous losses. So the thing with Kelvin is like he either loses in like really really great performances that you go, man, he probably could have won that, or still puts on a performance like the Israel Adesanya one where you just are blown away even in defeat, like his stock rises up, and then he usually also can have defeats that you're like, man, that wasn't Kelvin, and then he bounces right back and gets some really impressive wins, and then you're like, whoa, Kelvin is, he is who I think he is, right? He's a very good fighter, certainly, a ranked fighter for sure, and whatever weight class he decides to compete in, certainly top 10 easy. You could make an argument for a top 5. But then this loss to Jack Hermanson kind of felt like it was in the middle. It wasn't like he didn't blow you away with his performance in defeat, and it also wasn't a defeat where you go, man, that wasn't Kelvin Gastelum. It was also a very short fight as well. But again, maybe that's why as well. It just felt a little bit differently. But he's now on a 3-fight skid, and it just felt like after that Israel Adesanya performance, it was the fight of the night. He almost, defeated us Adesanya. He certainly gave him the toughest fight of his career, at least UFC career. It just felt like from that point on, things were gonna sort of skyrocket for Gastelum, but that hasn't been the case. So I don't necessarily think that like a lot of people are writing him off. I don't think that's the case. I think these things happen. Sometimes you fight and you're gonna get caught and you're gonna get knocked out fairly quick. Sometimes it's the other way around with a jiu-jitsu specialist. You get caught in a submission quick and you made a dumb mistake and that costs you the entire fight. So it's interesting. I don't know what's next for him. I think he is a little bit undersized for 185 pounds, but again, I think he compensates that with his deep gas tank. And also, I feel like he's kind of like got that King Velasquez build, which I think is like he's just a little more compact. He doesn't necessarily have to look big and have all these muscles to be strong. You know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure when 185-pound guys clinch with him or start wrestling with him, he certainly doesn't feel weak. But with that said, I do think there's a tiny little bit of being undersized. I was there when he fought Chris Weidman. It was in New York. It was in Long Island, and I was there for that fight. And I remember watching it in person and thinking, like, yeah, like if size were even here, I think the fight could be different. Certainly felt like Chris Weidman was taking, using to his advantage his size, and I mean he should do it, right? You should use every advantage that you possibly have in a fight. So I don't know what's next for him. I don't know if I want to see him return to 170 pounds. I don't rule out Tyron Woodley trying out 185, especially now that he doesn't have a belt and he's coming off a few losses himself, two straight losses. Um, so maybe he wants to test the waters at 185 to see how he looks. Look, I don't hate that fight with Tyron Woodley, but I just feel like at this point, I don't think Kelvin is going to return to 185, and for whatever reason, even though it could make sense, I just don't see Tyron Woodley at 185. I mean, I don't think Kelvin Gastelum is going to return to 170, and I don't think Tyron Woodley will move up to 185. Woodley has never really struggled with weight. He's always been able to make weight just fine. I mean, it wouldn't catch me as surprise if he decides to try 185, but I think he's better built for 170. So I think Kelvin, at this point, coming off 3 straight losses, you can't really get too picky with the matchmaking, to be quite frank. So kind of like anyone works, to be honest. I'm looking at the rankings right now. I mean, the rankings are up there. I mean, the rankings are like, pretty packed. I mean, 185 has some solid dudes. I think Kelvin is ranked 7 right now. The rankings haven't been updated. I'm assuming he's gonna drop a few spots, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really feel too strong about like where he goes next. I think anything works at this point. I'll say this: I don't think it would hurt. I mean, he's only 28 years old. He's still pretty young. I don't think it would hurt for him to fight outside of the rankings. Take 2 fights outside of the rankings. Figure things out. Get some wind back in your sail, right? And yeah, get some momentum back, and then start fighting the top dogs. Get a little bit of a breather, not fighting killers the entire time. So I think he could benefit, fighting outside of the rankings. And look, if you can make 170, then I think it's worth trying. It's worth trying. Because at 170, some of the issues that he has with size would be non-existent. But again, can he make 170? Because he's had a lot of issues making that weight before. So yeah. To be honest, I don't feel strongly about where he goes next. Outside of the rankings, I'd like to see that, but I still certainly believe Kelvin can be a very game fighter and certainly still one of the best at 185. So Michael Terrell now. Excluding actual champions, who would be awarded the Fight Island belt? So that is a great question. I think that's actually better if you ask me for next episode once we're wrapped up with the UFC Fight Island series, because we still have fights this Saturday. And there's some good fights on that card. I'm looking at it right now. Obviously, with Whitaker versus Till in the main event, I think outside of the title fights that we've seen at Fight Island, I think this might be the most important fight, excluding title fights. I think from here, the next title challenger could come out likely. I'm trying to think of other like key fights that went down that could probably have like a little bit of a higher status than that one. Non-title fights, of course. I don't know, but either way, that card's pretty good. You got Shogun Rua versus Little Nog Werdum versus Alexander Gustafsson. That's going to be interesting. Gustafsson's heavyweight debut. Carlos Esparza versus Marina Rodriguez. Paul Craig's fighting Antigulov. You got Alex Oliveira's fighting. You got some good fights. So ask me that question next week. I think it would make most sense if I answer that next week once we're wrapped up with the Fight Island series. But good question. All right. Midwestward asks Askarov, Fiziev, Kimev, all impressive. Which of those fighters are you most intrigued going forward? That's a good question, yeah. So Askarov, to be honest, like, not that I'm not impressed by him, but I saw him fight Brandon Moreno, like I said. And then at that point, when I saw that, and that was a bit ago, that was last September, yeah. I was like, all right, like that guy's pretty good. I thought he lost to Moreno, but certainly a very good fighter. So like he with this performance against Pantoja, I mean, he didn't show me something that I didn't already know. He's a very, very good fighter. Now the other guys, it was a little bit different because it was their UFC debut, and so you're kind of taking away a little bit by not their UFC debut, but it was like breaking performances. So I was taking a little bit more away by them. I think Rafael Fiziev was probably the one I have my eye on. I mean, with his background in Muay Thai and kickboxing, like that's a guy you got to watch out. And 155 pounds, it's a fun division to be in right now. It's certainly a hot division. So that's someone I'm definitely keeping an eye on. And if you look at the division, there's a lot of fun strikers there that could give him some fun bouts. So I'm really looking forward to his fights in the UFC. I think that performance that he had against Gia Casey here, it was very, very good. I was very, very impressed. And then the other dude, he also had a pretty impressive debut, and he's actually fighting again, right? Pretty soon. Or at least that's what that was reported. I was also blown away by his dominance and by the way he was able to impose his will on his opponent and what he was able to do. So clearly, someone else to keep an eye on for sure. So yeah, I mean, all good. That list right there is all good prospects. So definitely keeping an eye on all those. But if I had to pick, I'm gonna go with Rafael. I think I have my eye on him for sure out of the three. All right, next question is another one in Spanish. I was getting Spanish questions. I don't know why, but I'll do a little bit of translating. I appreciate them though. Hola Dani, con la mayoría de los peleadores quejándose de sus salarios con el UFC, me gustaría que preguntaras más acerca de sus trabajos reales, los que pagan las cuentas, mientras ellos prosiguen sus sueños en el UFC. Gracias, mucha suerte, excelente trabajo en lo que haces. Muchas gracias, Peter. Appreciate it. So Peter basically asking, with a lot of fighters complaining about pay, which I don't think a lot of fighters are, but certainly more than before. He would like for sort of media and myself to ask fighters about their actual jobs. And I feel like, some jobs are very ordinary and there might not be like a big story there, but there are some that are. I mean, I think the media has done a good job at, for example, talking about, right, Geoff Neal was a waiter for a long time, right, if I'm not mistaken. Brandon Royval, right, the guy that beat Tim Elliott and made a crazy debut on short notice. My colleague Nolan King interviewed him and had a good interview talking about his job. He actually quit his job right afterwards since he won a Performance of the Night bonus. Even when Brendan Moreno first came on the scene, he worked in, his family has a business of piñatas and he worked there as well. So I think there's some stories that are kind of interesting and certainly worth reporting on. But a lot of them are just regular jobs as well. I mean, they're worth talking about for sure. Maybe that's something we could do a little bit more of. Talk about the jobs that pay the bills for these guys and girls. All right, Tan Nguyen. He asks, or she, I don't know, how can UFC improve upon the Fight Island concept and experience? So this is a great question. At first, I was kind of bummed out with the whole Fight Island theme thing because it didn't really feel like Fight Island. And I feel like the whole concept was overhyped. It was like, Fight Island, it's going to be an octagon on the beach, and there's going to be palm trees and this and that, and it's going to be great and all that. And then once the fights rolled out, I mean, to be honest, it pretty much looks the same, just like any other broadcast. Obviously, it looks different without the crowd and all that, but within this new normal, it looks just like a regular Contender Series or, UFC Apex Fight Night event. It doesn't really look that much special. There are a few slight changes, but again, it's not it's not drastic. So that was a little bit lame. The fact that it was a bit overhyped. But now that I think about it, and with COVID-19 just really starting to rise back up again in the U.S. And we already seen some states shutting down again, and I think another shutdown is likely. I think multiple shutdowns are likely. In fact, I think that's what was expected. I was listening to a podcast, and they had basically an epidemiologist, hopefully I said that right, and also a journalist that just covered epidemics. That's like sort of his beat, right? Just like my beat is to cover mixed martial arts. So an expert in the topic, and he described very much the future as a dance. The governments were going to engage, and society was going to engage in these dances where, we open, and we see the cases go up, which is natural. As soon as you open, you start letting people, go to restaurants and do all these things. It's obviously going to, the more interaction people have, the more the cases are going to go up, thus resulting in more deaths. And, the goal here is that people are going to die. That's what's going to happen. Period. Whatever. I mean, there's no way around that. But what you can do is minimize sort of the least amount of deaths and sort of have it so that like there's no surges in the hospitals and making sure that everyone gets proper care. Like you don't want anyone passing away from not being able to get proper care. If they pass away because just the virus was too strong on them, like shit. That's it sounds horrible, but like that's what happens in a pandemic with a deadly virus. You know what I'm saying? But there shouldn't be. But the proper care thing, like making sure people have the proper care, that's a thing we can address ourselves. If people are dying because they're not able to get proper care, that's on us. That's on us as a society. So basically, what they were saying is that it's going to be much of a dance. It's going to be we're going to open, things are going to go up again as soon as they sort of hit a threshold where experts think it's quite dangerous and could lead to people not getting proper care. We close back up, then the cases go back down, we open up like that, and we're just going to keep doing that until we find a vaccine, right? Until people develop antibodies, and we're not even sure if antibodies are like a thing with this virus, because I've heard people getting it a second time. So, there's still a lot of unknowns, but anyways, with the cases going up, I certainly with the states shutting down, that's going to be problems for the UFC to host events in the US. So they're going to rely on Abu Dhabi and the Fight Island concept, Yas Island, to have events. And if that's the case, I'm kind of glad they didn't go for like a gimmicky, Fight Island theme, because if the new normal is going to be watching fights in Abu Dhabi or from Abu Dhabi, I just want my regular UFC events. I don't want the whole thing to be like this concept, right? So in the end, I think it's actually kind of working out, because I do see a second, knock on wood, hopefully not, right? But I do see a second shutdown coming. So we'll see. Lockdown. All right. So anyways, how can the UFC improve upon the UFC Fight Island concept? I think it's fine. Especially moving forward, since we're going to be seeing more Fight Island. This is not like an isolated thing. If this would have been just a July thing, okay, yeah, certainly a lot of things that could get improved on as far as like aesthetics and the theme-wise. But if this is going to be a constant thing and they're going to come back to it, just give me my good old regular UFC event. All right, next question is by Jesus. If Oblak leaves for Chelsea, would it be a good thing, since the funds can be used to further rebuild the team to be able to compete in Spain? So I don't even know what to say here. To be honest, I haven't seen any like real news about it. I've basically just seen rumors on Twitter, like tweets for the most part. I've yet to see like some real thing about this, but apparently there's rumors that Chelsea's trying to buy John Oblak, Atletico Madrid's goalkeeper, who is one of the best in the world. And part of what they want to do, allegedly, is give a good chunk of money to Atletico and also trade Kepa, which is their goalkeeper, who is not good. And to me, that whole thing just doesn't make any sense. Like there are some players that like are tough to replace. There's some players that are replaceable, but Jan Oblak to the team, he's so key. Like Atletico Madrid, their style of play, especially because it's so defensive, they rely on a good goalkeeper. Look, if we would have had there's teams that can get away from conceding a lot of goals and having a bad goalkeeper and shit, even having a poor defense. As long as they have a really good offense, who cares if they're getting scored 4 goals if they can score 5. You know what I'm saying? But with Atletico's goals are usually they win games by like 1-0, 2-0, things like that. There's games here and there where they can score 5, and you'll see the goleada, right? What we say in Spanish. But for the most part, they sort of just get by. And to do that, you need someone that's very, very good, on goal, and that's Jan Oblak. He's one of the best, and you need a world best, and the world best, there are very, very good goalkeepers out there, but world bests, like there's a handful. The top 5, you need a top 5 goalkeeper in Atletico, if you intend on playing with that style, which obviously Simeone, if you guys know him by now, he's not gonna change. He's not gonna change his style whatsoever. So I don't think Jan Oblak is going anywhere. And I think it's a horrible idea. The team needs Jan Oblak more than anything. Like Rodri left, that sucked. But again, Thomas Partey is there, Saúl's there, Koke is there. There's guys that can replace him. Marcos Llorente, who's been doing a fantastic job. But Jan Oblak, that's tough to replace, man. That's tough to replace. So I don't think Oblak is going anywhere, really. All right, I'm approaching the 11:30 minute mark here. I told you guys there was a ton of Twitter questions, which is awesome. I love it. But which leaves less time for the YouTube questions. Now, this one's the last question. I thought this was kind of cool. Dustin Love is making these masks, which I think is pretty tight. Obviously, wear your masks, wash your hands, especially wear your masks if you're in a grocery store or a confined space. And I 100% want one of those. I don't even know how Werdum does it, but I'll try my best right here. Did I get it? I don't know. But certainly, yeah, I'm about it. DM me on IG, and then if you're really making one of those, DM me on IG and we'll figure something out. Because I don't want to give you my home address. That's a little weird, but maybe we can figure something else. So DM me on IG and we'll get that taken care of. And I appreciate you offering. Nice masks. Great idea, by the way. All right, I got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to take like 2 YouTube questions and then bounce out. Amy Wee, who's next for Ariane Lipski? So, great performance. A savage submission win on Saturday. It was one of those submissions where, and I said it on Twitter, a lot of people try to make jiu-jitsu as this very complex and sophisticated system, and it can be. It definitely can be, especially when you're trading in the gi. Steps to a position, not even to a submission, steps to get to a position can sometimes be 10 steps. You gotta grab here, then you gotta pass it to your other hand. There's like you gotta position your foot here, then switch your hips. Like there's so many things in jiu-jitsu can be very complex, but jiu-jitsu can also be very, very, very simple, and it could be as simple as understanding body mechanics, which I think that's what jiu-jitsu teaches a lot of people, at least people that actually get jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu isn't just memorizing steps and moves, because anyone that's ever grappled, you're going to be in positions often that you've never been in. Like the variation of positions is so wide, like the range is so wide, right? Like just little tweaks here and there can drastically change what you can and cannot do in a position. So that's why you see, like if you, for example, like I'll give you guys an example as personal example. I went through a period where like I tore my meniscus on my right knee from training, and then I moved to New York City, and then I didn't have money to like pay for an academy because in New York it's super expensive. Like some of these academies charge $200, $250 a month. That's a lot of money. And so there was a time that like I wasn't really training all that much, and I'm obviously not training right now because of the pandemic. And prior to that, I wasn't training a whole lot of jiu-jitsu. But I remember like just being sort of out of the game for a bit and then coming back and then just seeing like an entire new system of techniques and all this other stuff. And like jiu-jitsu is always evolving. Why? Because there's so much you can do with it. So with that being said, like part of understanding jiu-jitsu is just understanding body mechanics. So a lot of times that you're grappling, you do moves that are not necessarily moves, that don't necessarily have a name, that you might not have ever even done before. But in live grappling, they just make sense because you understand by learning other concepts how the body works. And Ariane Lipski understands jiu-jitsu. She saw a knee. She knew that she was on top of it in a way that she could make leverage of a knee bar, even having her leg compromised in the calf slicer, and she just pulled it. So it's as simple as that. Jiu-jitsu is as simple as grabbing a limb and pulling it away or pushing it away that it's not supposed to go. That's it. And that's what she did. So that was impressive to me. The actual submission, the mechanics of it weren't impressive, but the fact that she was able to recognize that in a fight, in a UFC fight, because you might do that in live grappling where you got time and there's nothing at stake and you're out there thinking and sort of taking it easy. But to do that in an actual UFC fight, that was very impressive. And Lipski, the queen of violence, and then on the feet, she's an absolute savage. So I think she's got a bright future. She's only 26 years old. She was born in 1994. I'm older than her. I'm 27. So that to me is pretty crazy. So now on a 2-fight win streak. I think just give her fights, let her get a little bit more experience, more UFC experience. I wouldn't look. I mean, her only 2 defeats were against Molly McMahon and Jane Calderwood, two very solid fighters. So that should tell you something, right? Maybe she's not ready for that level yet. So let her grow. Give her someone not with a big name, Let her build a streak. Let her build on her skills. That's what I would say. All right, I'll take one more and I'll bounce out. Dustin Lowe, sorry for spamming last minute with questions. Haha, my goal was to put as many. To put so many, you had to choose at least one. Hope my plan works. So yes, I need some time to load these into the system. That's why I was a little bit late to this live Q&A. But yeah, when I say last call, it's last call. It's maybe like five minutes after last call. So after I put the tweet out. So make sure you get your questions in early to get a better chance to get featured. And also, sometimes people ask earlier questions that are your same questions. So it's not like your question wasn't great. It's just I'm going to cover that topic in different questions. So if I didn't feature it, my bad. But there's next week. Appreciate the master. That was cool. Yeah, I think that does it. That does it for questions. So I'm gonna bounce out. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, apologies for being late. Again, just an overwhelming amount of questions as you can see. Usually, I go half and half with Twitter and YouTube. This was more like 95% Twitter and 5% YouTube. So there you have it. Get your questions in on Twitter. Just a couple things. Again, I interviewed Brando Moreno. That's up on MMAJunkie.com. 2 different stories. You can check that out. Great insight from Moreno there. And so that interview is fresh. Then we got obviously a UFC and Bellator this week. So that's going to be fun. Make sure you tune into MMA Junkie for all your coverage. We got John Morgan at UFC Fight Island. And then I believe Nolan King will be at Bellator. So we're going to have coverage across the board. So yeah, tune into that. And yeah, next time I talk to you guys, Hablemos MMA, my Spanish language podcast on MMA Junkie is going to be out. So I'm excited for that. I believe I'll be hopping on the next MMA Junkie radio episode. I'll reveal who the first guest will be then. That publishes on Thursday, so stay tuned to that. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Remember, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it. And that's it. You guys have a good rest of your week.